Welcome to Portals of Perception and to this new exploration into flow. We've gathered here today with three practitioners of flow, with Dan Leahy, Leticia Nieto, and with Catherine Johnson. And what you're about to discover is that we are journeying in the beginning of the exploration to try to appreciate and understand the phenomenon of flow. And somewhere halfway through the conversation, as I struggle to retreat from being a facilitator to being a participant, the dance unfolds. And at some point it's as though we forgot that we were doing a Portals conversation for the Portals platform and started to dance with the discovery of the moment, which was the idea in the first place, but we couldn't predict the way it would unfold. And so take this journey with us as an invitation, as an inspiration for you in the various situations where you play, to discover in the moment what is arising and to become the free agent, the active live player, a live player that you can be to facilitate flow in your life and in the various circumstances that you serve. Thank you, and come along for the ride. Today we are in conversation about flow. Flow as a phenomenon, flow as a way of being and doing, flow as a healing strategy, and flow as a practice and as a way of dancing with life. We have here with us three practitioners of flow: Dan Leahy, Catherine Johnson, and Leticia Nieto. So please let me invite you first to introduce yourself, each one of you, and share a starter working definition for flow, whatever way you'd get us started into the conversation. And why is the awareness of flow an important part of your work? And perhaps, Dan, I can invite you to get us started. You introduced me to your two colleagues here, so let us begin with you, please, offering a starter.
I'm Dan Leahy. In terms of background, I'd say I've got a long history working in higher ed, with an emphasis or focus on a couple of different professional arenas, one being marriage and family therapy, and the other being leadership development. Flow for me is challenging to describe or put into words. It's more an experience in the moment. When I think of my experience in the grad program I was part of and where I began working with Catherine Johnson, there were moments where I had a sense that the student that I was interacting with, their eyes lit up. And it's like something showed up that wasn't the model or the content of the curriculum. It was a moment where they just were present in some learning kind of way. And I always found myself intrigued, curious, alive in those moments. So I found myself hungry to find those, particularly in this day and age.
I guess I'll go next. As with you, Dan, I have a long history straddling in higher education and outside of higher education, about 40 years. Most of that time dedicated to fostering of developing of counselors, mental health and marriage and family therapy counselors, and then more recently working on a PhD curriculum for leadership. So lots of overlap. But my main focus really has been psychodrama and expressive arts, and how, and I'm a human development psychologist by training. So my focus has been on change and particularly the question of social change in the direction of liberation. So how flow fits into that is a strong belief or sense or recognition that liberation and equity are drives that we all have, and that get interrupted or disturbed, that they're static, that interferes. So I'm interested in re-emerging patterns that are decolonized and working with what I call evolutionary creativity, which is simply getting out of the way so that the good can come. And that's part of how I think about flow. At the core is a concept of spontaneity. And so that's the touchstone and the point of contact.
Thank you. It's so attractive already to stay with themes that you both offered. Let's have Catherine offering a starter.
I think in way of introduction to myself, I was a wilderness guide for, almost 15 years. And then I started teaching with Dan in the same graduate program in leadership development. And the fact that I started out my professional career as a young person as a wilderness guide really shaped me, getting people to work together in the wilderness, and being part of that magic and mystery of people discovering they can do more than they think they can, of the environment soothing and also challenging us, and then just a great love for the beauty of the outdoors. Teaching was no different in the graduate program, really. It was just coming kind of inside, and inside people more than external stimulation. I too have long been an advocate for social justice, and for diversity, the value of difference to grow us and enrich our lives. And in terms of flow, I think probably the most dramatic experience of that that I know is paddling whitewater. You must find the path of least resistance, and you must relax, even in the most frightening of moments. If you can relax, you can get through it. And that stays with me today. I'm a writer. I'm a partner, stepmother, and I'm a farmer. I've been a farmer for the last dozen years, so I grow food. And another experience of flow with that is, you do everything you can, but there's an element of faith and trust in the water and the light and the soil to bring forth the food. And so that's part of the journey as well.
So I'm intrigued already with how, from three similar and yet different backgrounds, there is so much richness. And I want us to go deeper and unlock more with what you're describing, Dan, in the sense of you're in the classroom and beyond the model and the plan and the curriculum, there is a moment when something gets switched on or activated, and you see it in the eyes, people around you, and something else appears through the conversation. And I'm equally intrigued, Leticia, with what you're describing with a sense of creativity and taking people into different kind of experiences and facilitating what you're describing as decolonizing. And I want to know more what you mean by that, whatever perhaps got arrested in historic or entrenched or limiting patterns, and facilitating the release of that and the liberation of that through creative work. And Catherine, I'm interested to hear more about the discovery of flow in nature, the outdoors and wilderness, and all the way from leading and working with others to tending to the land and farming. So we've got a rich menu here for a start, and where I would invite us to explore next is from each of your experiences. Can you talk a little more to what initiates flow? What are some of the gates of how we make this, or we facilitate this moment of transition? In one moment we felt a sense of stuckness and not flow, and the next moment something else happens. What is this porous veil, a porous portal that enables us to make that transition?
Well, in the work of Jacob Levi Moreno, the founder, creator of psychodrama, sociometry, and role theory, the key idea is simply readiness and a sufficiency of warm-up. So in some ways, it's not true that we're stuck. In some ways, it's simply about a recognition of cycles, and that the more, in some cases, the more intensity in the experience of intransigence, the more warm-up will arise to bring pretty significant spontaneity. So it's all flow. And the part that feels yucky is partly because of resistance or the need for more warm-up, for more play. So the play is what facilitates access, and the stiltedness makes it take longer, or it can be interrupted. But flow is available all the time. It's not, as Dan said, it's not something we have to seek. And I think, Catherine, you've described conditions. I'm so curious to hear more. The conditions of warm-up would be my answer to your question.
Just staying with you a little more, how would you characterize this quality of readiness that and warm-up that, as you say, provide access?
Well, we warm up just as when we exercise, we warm up our bodies. We warm up to a space, to people, to roles. We warm up to the task. We go from a place of a state of not doing it yet, to a state of doing it, being in the engagement. And that journey is one of warming, and it's facilitated primarily by play, by trying out, by dancing, as you've said. So physical warm-up helps, but also heart warm-up, belly warm-up, warming up to ideas. You know it when you see it. You can't contrive it, but you can train it. So there's such a thing as spontaneity training. We can learn what our own pathway is. So thinking about, for example, working with theater, playback theater, which is one of the things that I do, when it's time to get ready for a performance, different actors need different things. Some people need to go for a quiet walk, and some people need to meditate, some people need to do vocal exercises. Different people may need different things, but they know what they need to be able to get on a stage, hear a description of a story from a teller, and improvise a response that is artful and complete and maybe even at times transcendent. That readiness to be an instrument of what we might call the first universe, the allness, the oneness, the big. It's a readiness to be part of that which is always flowing, that which is always moving, and surrender and rest, relaxation, as Catherine was saying, to those rapids.
Leticia, I love that idea of sufficiency of warm-up, because I'm aware, even in this moment, like how much my body relaxed at the word sufficiency. Like, oh, okay, I'm enough here. We're enough here. Here we are. Like I could just feel my whole body warming up. That was just so wonderful. Thank you for that. I think that's really key for me. My body has to be in a place of calm, openness. I have to come into a kind of lightly attended sensory awareness, hearing you, seeing you, also being aware of my surroundings, but in a way that is receiving, so that I can then give forward what is next to come. And slowing down helps. Speech, breath, movement. That's what comes to mind right now.
So I'm thinking things like, I end up working hard at stuff to try and make stuff happen. And when I have the experience that it ain't working, is when I think I'm more open to or ready for, well, can I relax? Can I play with this? Can I get curious? And for me, the sense is moving from my head more to my heart or my body. And I know, Leticia, I've experienced that with you in this consulting work that we're doing in this cultural change project effort, where you've invited the team to play with, well, okay, so this is the issue that we're stuck on or stuck with. And we've somehow been stuck with this for a while. And I'm going, yeah, that's right. So let's do some role plays around that, which to me is like, well, let's play with this. And what shows up in the midst of the role play is it's playful, it's intriguing, it's surprising. And I have that sense, like you're describing, Catherine, of just sort of relaxing into it and seeing what shows up. And Catherine, with you, I think my first experience with you was in a time in the program where my sense was we were really wrestling with, well, we should be more focused on diversity and equity and inclusion. And we were struggling with that, or I was struggling with that, and not knowing how to make it work. And you were with a group of students, and we were dancing with the students' experience of the faculty and the staff wrestling with this. And you then wrote a letter capturing the essence of what the students' perspective was, with an invitation to the staff and faculty that, to me, I experienced as it was like, oh, like it's not about we need to work this. It's more, how do we engage and learn together around this? And it was a significant shift in that moment in the program. And I think I've still got that letter. And that was, 1988, I think it was. So that's what comes to mind to me, is like shifting from, I got to work it, I got to make it happen, to, oh, like what's already here and how do we play with that?
So I'm intrigued that we go deeper and further this to see what else can we discover about the anatomy of release, the anatomy of liberation. One of the observations you offered there, Leticia, was that it's all flow. We're never not in an ecology where flow is available. Flow is always available. And yet there are times when we, or something about the system we operate in, is tilted. And then you're saying it's the warm-up and it's the relaxing into discovering it. And It's often the discovery through play, and I'm intrigued with this. Dan, what you're sharing about the role playing, and what is it that we invite people to be able to play a different script than the script they have in the moment in which they feel stilted, and by allowing them, providing them that space to be for a moment somebody else or some other role in that space in between the script that was running to the new space that they were invited into, flow is becoming more available. Say more about all of this, please.
Well, it's again the main idea is spontaneity. So, and the definition I think for spontaneity might be helpful. It's a new response to something that has been around, a breakthrough, or an adequate response to something new, a new challenge. So it doesn't have to be bells and whistles. It could be, again, it's sufficient. So the question is, what role access is needed to meet what is arising? In psychodrama, we define the self as that which emerges from roles rather than the roles emerging from self. And so the work is often about exploration and trying out. So there's this one concept that might be helpful here, and that's the concept of resourcing. So at the beginning of a drama, the question the director might ask themselves is, or might ask the protagonist, is who or what in this field, in this situation, as you encounter this problem, who or what would you like to have with you, or do you notice in the space? And often, I can't tell you how many times the person is thinking about the scene and they say, oh, there's a tree right outside the window. It's always there. It's, become the tree. Speak as the tree. What do you say as the tree? What do you say to the tree? And then we begin. And as each element is cast, we're living into, as Catherine was saying, the inner as well as the outer ecology, which tend to be complementary, reciprocal, patterned. So all that gets cast, all that gets concretized is an element from within, but also a representation of the difficulty. So maybe there'll be one or more antagonists that are cast, or problems or challenges or barriers. Those who are stuck or struggling, the conflict will be concretized, and anything and everything can be voiced, can be cast, can be given shape, and can be created such that we can be in relationship to it. And so there's this idea of the surplus reality, which is possible on the stage. Anything can happen on the stage. Absolutely anything. But because it happens on the stage, then it also can happen elsewhere. The interchange is real, and it manifests in an external reality. We have less charge with the person we were in conflict with. We show up different in our relationships. So this playful engagement through role reversal amplifies the roles, amplifies access. All of these elements are played by the protagonist, by the way, right? That protagonist jumps around between all the different, parts or characters, and gives them life, gives them breath. They all originate from that person as elements, as roles. And so if I can play my antagonist, then I have empathy. If I can play the resource, I have wisdom. If I can play, and so the warm-up is simply the readiness to do that. To if somebody is invited to find a resource and they can't, they're not warmed up enough. Or they're invited to step into the tree and they can't, they're not warmed up enough. So there might be a stepping stone. But once a person can do that, we're off to the races. It's completely reliable. The pattern, the corrective pattern, if you want, or the deeper, more decolonized, more round pattern will make itself known, and there will be answers, but it won't be about the answers. It'll simply be a shift, and the shift happens and the small becomes the large. So it's an ecological idea about the intersection and the interrelationship. It's not about fixing anything, really. I don't know if that...
Yeah, it's beautiful. And the power and the beauty in what you're describing is that you're grounding the experience of that availability as nothing to do with the muse being around, so to speak, but more to do with the programmatic, if I can use this term, preparatory buildup of readiness and warm up. It's a capacity that comes online because of the work you've done, such that all systems wiring availability is there, ready for you. And the other powerful invitation you're making is in grounding us in the definition of spontaneity. It doesn't have to be the first from the beginning of time, but there is a novelty factor in the configuration that emerged in the moment. And part of the anatomy of that, as I listen to that definition, is we are literally experiencing a new innervation in new synaptic connection in the brain, which releases its energetic dimension and is part of the conductive release that occurs in the process.
Exactly.
I loved your frame. It's not about the answers. I love that. Thank you.
Yeah, there's a great opening 2 lines from a poem by Naomi Shihab Nye, and she wrote the poem because a student asked her to write a poem for him. And the opening lines are, "You can't order a poem like a taco. Walk up to the truck and say, 'I'll take 2, please. Still, I like your style.'" And I think that idea of finding a fix, creating something right now on demand, the doorway in is still, I like your style. So it's relational from that moment. And then, I can, whether it's relational with what's in my surround or with people, then I can begin to engage in what Leticia, you were speaking to, is like always there. Like it's there, but you can't order it like a taco.
Let's build a little this idea of the interior and the exterior and the interplay and the porous nature between from the interior to the exterior, and how both when we work with people and when we work with perhaps small or larger systems, how presencing that and how facilitating the awareness of what's on the inside and what's on the outside, how it is part of this work that we are sensing into and exploring. If I'll ask directly, Dan, in your experience, for example, when you do the work with family dynamics and or with teams or in any circumstance, and you're seeing or you're sensing the system and you're sensing it in yourself and you're sensing it outside of, how do you work with that awareness? What is it you do to facilitate its liberation?
I like the question. I'm wrestling with the notion of distinguishing between external and internal. I know when I go there, it's sort of like I'm separating stuff. I end up in my head, and I don't think I'm very useful. I'm thinking there's something about, like for me, the words are parallel process. I find myself really curious about, so how is what's going on externally also going on in my body, in my heart and soul? Is there some way we can see the complementarity or the both andness, the intertwine, the weave in the moment? And then what's that like for us to sort of ponder that? Like what shows up? What am I curious about? What might that open doors to other reflections or other things we might play with? So that's what I have in terms of a response to the question. I wish I had a clear example of. So this is a moment where that they're unique to that moment. And I struggle with how to capture it in language, if you will.
One of the examples you'd often offer then when we would get together with the Souls on Deck circle, that's a circle of practitioners that met for about 12 or 15 years here in the Pacific Northwest. You'd often talk about an experience where you don't know what to do. And there is a moment, there is a pause, there is a moment of silence. And in the silence and in that pause and in the permission to attend to it without needing to have a solution, something will grab your attention, that will surprise you with a new door that was not visible or available before. And that's how you have often described that sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for me, there's something about stopping the pounding on a particular door that I'm wrestling with and just like settling down. And in those moments where I settle down, like something usually shows up that I find intriguing or curious or funny, and I trust that. And often I've had the experience when I've been willing to share that, like in the Souls on Deck group that you're describing, Aviv, that there's a response in the group. Like I'm not the only one that has that sense in that moment. It's like, oh yeah, I'm feeling something like that too. And then it's like we're off to the races. Like the conversation flows, it gets generative. It's fun.
So if I listen to what it is we are sourcing now, it has about it the nature of the capacity to be present here and now, and perhaps the radical honesty in the moment to speak to that, to speak to what is emergent right here, right now. And once we give voice to that, like right now we are sensing the surge of this inquiry, and I am dancing between partly facilitating, partly participating in the conversation, seeking a way to retreat from the facilitating to participating and make more space to you, and me voicing that provides a way for me to relax even more into the exploration. So while the cameras and the recording is going on, we are stepping back from any performative pressure. Anytime we introduce a performative pressure, we go in our heads rather than actually being in the flow. And I sense, Leticia, that's the power of working on stage and working with that modality, because people who this is what they do for a living, they no longer, there is an easier transition there with the awareness that you offered earlier, that every person must bring to the table their self-knowledge. What is it you need to do? Do you need to have a quiet moment? Do you need to go outside for a walk? Do you need to hum? Do you need to whistle? Do you need to do 70 push-ups? I don't know, whatever it is you need to do.
So just to say, there's an element of self-knowledge and self-tending, coming to know more and more what are the conditions for my own spontaneity. And then there's a trust in each other in the process. And the isomorphism that Dan was pointing to, that things echo up and down the system, is whenever I'm in a space with you, Dan, I hear you in my mind and sometimes with my ears asking the questions about that. And where I sit with that is that I really trust that a change at one level can bring change at another. So those small changes will also, because of the principle of isomorphism and systemic echo, a change on the stage can have an impact, and often does, in the lived experience of the family that is, being treated in therapy. So psychodrama is a therapeutic modality, and playback theater is a community building modality. They're related but not the same. And in both cases, there's a recognition of this surplus piece, which is that the personal and collective unconscious doesn't make that big of a distinction between something that happens in the as if and something that has happened in reality. So maybe like that new movie that I had trouble watching about everything everywhere all at once or something. That there are all these parallel realities, and so, for example, with trauma, there's an experience of a really devastating impact. And then when that's worked with psychodramatically, there is another narrative side by side with the narrative of what occurred. And the new narrative doesn't delete the previous narrative, but they coexist. And similarly, in working with a group or an organization, the new narratives, the narratives that we emerge in these playful improvisational spaces, coexist. They don't correct or delete or neutralize the problem. But, and this is just a bias that I have, I believe that the one way to think about decolonization is that patterns of resistance exist in all of the areas where there's been marginalization. All the people who have endured and continue to endure do so because there are patterns of endurance, of resilience, of care, community care, and accountability that haven't ever gone anywhere. They remain, and they pulse, and they coexist with the supremacist dehumanizing forces. And so in some ways the work is not to get rid of the problem or necessarily fully dismantle supremacy, but to lean into the rounder patterns of reclamation and resistance that have always been there, and they exist in each person, in the disadvantaged or marginalized aspects of each person, and in groups. So this is all the ecological aspect is to consciously bring forth the voices that are often not heard in ourselves, and because they are the ones that have the more intact pattern. And the same is true for individual people in organizations or marginalized groups in the cultures.
If I'm hearing you correctly, Leticia, from that description, it sounded like to me some amplifying Dan's knocking on the door. Like rather than fixing, there are these patterns that are available that if space is made for them to emerge, then that creates a threshold for new possibilities. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, except that they are emerging. They're present. The invitation is to attend to them, to pay attention to them, which is a way of making room for them. But it isn't about, go excavate some kind of archaeological mystery in the deep places in the psyche. It's right here. I just recently told a story when I was a kid growing up in Puebla, Mexico. There was opportunity to, serve as a tour guide to tourists and, be somewhere and tell them things and have them ask you questions. And the key question, the question that often was asked was, these cultures were so advanced, and what happened to the people? What happened to them? Where did they go? Which was a fascinating thing, right? From the tourist perspective, because of course, as a joke, as a 13-year-old, I would say, I know, there's one. Look, right there. Well, there's another one. We have not, colonization failed. Ultimately, it failed. These cultures, these practices, these ways of being were not eradicated. Injured, but not eradicated. And the injury then became another element of condition for resistance. So in our personal psyche, as well as in the group and cultural, national, international, global psyche, these patterns are relatively intact. In fact, strong and intact, in part as a result of dehumanization. So these patterns are persistent and will outlast. The thing is, we can benefit right now from that.
To help people that are not familiar with some of the terminologies or the map of meaning you're painting, how do you define or explain colonization and the surplus element in reality? Just offer us inroads to these terms, because they're rich in context.
Colonization is the socio-economic historical process of primarily European, but actually many different geographies overtaking another geography during the era of expansion, whenever it began, and the impact of attempting to either eradicate or to genocide either the people or the culture or both, in order to create the best conditions for economic exploitation, to extract people, land, goods, as a part of this expansive empire building process in the history of the world. And so many people have been colonized or taken over or invaded by a neighbor or distant or close. And there's been all different patterns of that story. And what I want to get at is that with each of those violences, there was also a preserving and practices for not getting wiped out. So I think about chestnut trees all over, I think, Eastern Europe, maybe even Russia, caught a blight and were dying. And then at some point, as the thing was traveling west and trying to kill all the trees figured out how to go dormant, right? How to protect themselves. And then over time, when that cycle was over, they came back. So it's a similar idea.
And what you're proposing is that the fractal of that pattern, as it exists in the large history of one culture invading another and subjugating, that exists in the microdynamics of interpersonal, interorganizational systems. And actually there is what I hear is that there is an opportunity to release both the colonizing pattern and the response pattern that you describe in terms of survival. The system goes into some kind of a freeze or flight such that it can preserve itself for another cycle. Both of those patterns can be released, and the larger space that we are tending to in the inquiry into flow, the way it comes into this, how I'm processing it is, flow is not just something unto itself. In this context, we are sensing the healing and the honoring of what something is, a culture is, a person is, any system is, in terms of allowing it to discover its fuller potential. So the purpose is not create flow to create flow, although that can be a purpose. It is the release of whatever it is we're working with, so that it can be the fullest range and potential that's locked in it. That's how I would say back to you, what would you rephrase or restate about working with these fractals?
I mean, all we're doing is pointing out instructions, right? We're throwing words like noodles on the wall and making meaning of something that's hard to language. But it can certainly be put the way you put it. I tend to think about flow as the ultimate fundamental, truth, flow, the pulse, the movement, the unified field, oneness is always there, whether we're aware of it or not. And so when we surrender into it, or tap into it, or rest in it, then it allows us, or we have possibility for being filled with that, or have that move through us in a way that is more tasty. But I don't necessarily see it that we are creating flow. Rather that it's almost like an obedience factor, that we're leaning into that which is ultimate and true. And then the surplus part of that is that, so surplus reality just means the kind of reality we can make happen in fiction or on a stage. Surplus reality is that which is possible, but which the conserves, or the conditioning, or the limitations don't know is possible. So if we're on a stage, if we did a psychodrama right now and somebody wanted to talk to a dead friend, they could, or they wanted to fly, they could, or whatever. Everything is possible on the stage, and that we call that surplus reality. Everything is possible. That is the truth. And there's the story from several indigenous voices that say that the four-leggeds look at us, the two-leggeds, and say, well, this is how they must want it, because they have consciousness and they get to choose. So what we have is what we've created, and we can create different anytime. So I don't know if that's...
Yes, beautiful.
Catherine, I'm curious if there's any poetry, any story that's come to mind for you. I've always been moved by what you've put to words, put pen on paper. So I'm just curious if there's anything blowing in you.
Well, I was just by Leticia, your last comments, I was thinking about, I think most of the poetry that I write comes from a desire for a world I want to see, for that narrative that can coexist with this current narrative. So I think most of my poetry is looking at what is and then seeing what might be, or expanding what might be also here. There was something I was thinking about, the power. Well, just, I'm really struck by this beautiful, Aviv, you have brought us together. You have given us a framework of some kind, to discuss flow and the portals of that. And then Leticia, you're really acting, so like, I see Aviv, you have like said, here's our plot today. Here's where we're going to grow. And Leticia, you have this beautiful framework that you continue to offer us, like seeds, like we can plant the carrots here, and we can plant the things over here. And then, I had the sense of, Dan, you're always the one who goes, well, we could put the carrots here, but we could also maybe put some pollinators next to them and see what that does, and so I have this sense of us trying to grow this garden, and what I am best at is putting in watering systems and weeding and keeping those paths really clear, kind of like the just nitty gritty of it all. And I'm just appreciating us in this moment for sure. And what we're trying to open up to here. Really, it's really fun. The only other thing I'll say is that when I'm working with groups of people, I'm really curious about what matters deeply to each person in the room. And I'm curious in eliciting their stories about, the places they loved as a child, who they loved, who made a difference in their lives. And that's a kind of garden prep for any further work for me, because getting people to talk about something they love, there is universal possibility for understanding, connection. And I just, I really believe in the vulnerability that comes forward. When you ask somebody, describe a place you loved as a child, the incredible richness that unfolds from those conversations is a kind of garden prep for work that can be done.
So the part of what I do is I decode. Part of my meta processing that's always humming in the background is I decode the space and the conversation that I'm in, and the three keys, the three wisdoms you just offered, Catherine, about facilitating collective flow and collective possibility is inviting and creating each and every person to speak from the depth of what matters to them, and then hearing and honoring that, and naming it so it is appreciated in the middle. And then thirdly, very important, where you started there, knowing about yourself, knowing what it is that you bring to the dance, such that as you attend to the ecology you're in, you do not lose being grounded and being tethered in yourself, because if you do, you render yourself ineffective. So that self-knowledge or self-tending while you're tending to the whole is an important inner awareness and part of your toolkit.
You're really good at that, I'm telling you. All that kind of reframing and rephrasing is like, you make me sound really good. Thank you.
And I think I'm sourcing here a bit of Letitia's playbook and intelligence. So I'm going to offer a next move, and if you want to rephrase it or retailer it, please do. I'd invite that we do another round and we speak from. Either we try to speak from any role or any entity, a tree or a person or a cosmology, or speak from what we imagine flow itself would speak. If you were to speak to what we see in the world today, the struggle, the torment, the emergent possibility inside the struggle and the confusion and the torment. And if we were to each try to not solve the problem, but be the voice of whatever it is that would offer assistance into it in whatever way, what would you say? What would that voice of flow or of any entity offer?
That's a challenging question to me. I think of flow as being sacred, and who am I to try and speak for flow? So I'm wrestling with that. What does come to mind is the metaphor that's most working me these last few years, which is the transition from caterpillar to cocoon to butterfly, particularly when the caterpillar's in the cocoon and is melting down, literally. And that in that process, imaginal cells begin to emerge. which have the information of what's called for next, and that the process is one of the imaginal cells clumping. So I'm imagining that flow is saying, clump, damn it. My experience of the three of you on the screen is that you are imaginal cells in my experience with you. And this seems like it's a moment of clumping. So that's what comes to mind to me, but I don't know that I can speak for the sacred. So
I'll speak as the river of flow. So I am vast, and all you see is held by me. I offer you first milk to be nourished and held well and carried, witnessed. And then I offer you honey for your delight and for the chance to experience with your senses and with your body the contact that I can't have without you, because I am all things, but through you I get to have delight. And then I offer you wine that will come from your experience of challenge and the chance to be tempered and altered and radically decontextualized and then regrouped, such that you won't even recognize yourself anymore. And then finally, I invite you to rest in me as water, the water of the clarity that all is as it needs to be for that which needs to happen. And drink me in, because you are mostly me.
I began as a seep from the stones of love, and flowed and flowed and flowed, and gathered, eroded, changed, gathered. And out of this comes everything. You are not alone. You are part of this ever living, ever nourishing, ever evolving and creating river, running, holding, offering, bringing, carrying to a faraway sea that is also near, right here, and far away too.
Dan, do you want to come in, or?
I'm still working on clumping, but I am curious as a participant in the conversation, what shows up for you if you were to speak for flow, Aviv?
First, I am the soil that offers support and nourishment and is eternally fertile to forever regenerate and offer a new possible germination, a new beginning, a new start. That has about it something eternal. And so much of what we see is we see the the product of that life. We see the green. I look through the window as I speak, and I see these beautiful trees here in the Pacific Northwest. And when I just allow myself to feel and be the soil, become the soil, it is a vibrant radiance, an energetic pulse that emanates and shows up through everything that appears here. Flora, fauna, and all forms of life. So there is a sense through the soil of sourcing something deeper, which is the very pulse of life. And its multifaceted manifestation. And from the soil to the pulse of life, it takes me to the deepest yearning, the spiritual yearning in each and every one of us humans. The never-ending sense of wanting to be with and then being with the very thing we want to be with. It's a person we love. It's a state we yearn for. It's a gathering with others where we together dissolve and lose the sense of the separateness because we appreciate something that's emergent through us and with us, that's bigger than us, that for a moment we became parents for in the way we have allowed its emergence through us. So we became the womb with which it would appear, that yearning, that spirit of yearning that's deep inside each and every person, and that when I sense to that, I become present to the recognition of how much the pain, the turmoil, the difficulty in this world is so much right next to that, because so much of the pain that's inflicted is that deeper yearning being misplaced or being reversed or not being accessed in a way that is naturally realized and released. And because of that, it becomes injurious, one to one, group to group, nation to nation, all of us civilizationally, to the bigger theater of life we enjoy here on this planet. So that's what's coming up, this chain of life, the soil, the pulse of life, and the spirit yearning that is forever there in each one of us, in whatever language we will choose to describe it with. Thank you. May I ask that we do then one more final notation of what would you, by way of debriefing or appreciating our time here together, attempting to dance with life and with flow. What comes up for you?
Aviv, when you were talking, I felt myself feeling quite emotional. And I think you're talking about longing and belonging. I think touched something in me that I could really resonate with. And I wondered, I'm just wondering, Leticia and Dan, if anything in Aviv's speaking touched you as well. Like, is it here with us all together, or is it just simply with me and my yurt and COVID?
Well, it's clearly there for me. I just have this urgent hunger. Like, how the hell are we going to find our way, we, the people on this planet? I want to stop the polarization. I want to find some way to have that sense of belonging in a large way, as opposed to just small little clumping kinds of ways. So yeah, what you were saying rattled my cage too.
I felt tender and evoking and provoked into wanting more engagement. And a song came forward. May I share the song?
Please.
So this is a Lindsay Scott song called The Way Knows the Way. And then I translated it, so I'll sing it to you in English and then in Spanish. All right. You don't have to know the way knows the way. You don't have to plan the way, trust the way, feel your way. The way knows, the way knows, the way knows the way. No hay que saber por dónde ir, el dónde sabe ir. Sin planear se puede ir al confiar y sentir. Camina, camina, el donde sabe ir. Thank you.
I am sensing that we want to perhaps part on these very words, on the words of the song that you offered us. An invitation to let the way lead the way and lead us. The beauty of that, the power of that as a way of being, as a way of dancing with life. Thank you so very much. Along with our website at portalsofperception.org, Portals is also available on YouTube and on all podcast platforms, as well as social media. You can become an active member and join the conversation in community events. And you can help us get the word out by liking this content and by sharing it with your friends.